My name's Harold Bennett. I'm 62 years old, and last week my own son told me I wasn't welcome in his house for Christmas. There's no way to dress that up or soften it. He looked me right in the eye and said, Dad, you can't come here. It's not your place anymore. Those words didn't just sting. They hollowed me out in a way I didn't think was possible after everything I've already lost. It was the first Saturday of December in Cincinnati, the kind of evening when the neighborhood glows with Christmas lights strung from gutters, and the air smells like wood smoke mixed with cold river air. I'd stopped by Evan's place on my way home from picking up a part for my old Ford F-150. I wasn't planning on staying long. I just wanted to see him, maybe talk about the holidays, maybe even hear my granddaughter laugh while I fixed the broken hinge on their front gate. The driveway was crowded with SUVs and a shiny new Subaru with temporary tags. Rachel's parents were in town early, apparently. Inside, the house was warm, the kind of warmth you feel more in your chest than on your skin. The kitchen carried the smell of cinnamon candles and fresh sugar cookies. I settled on their leather couch, the one I'd chipped in for when Evan said the old sofa wasn't modern enough. I tried to break the silence the way I always did, with food. I could make my turkey this year, I said, the one with sage stuffing your mom used to love. I expected a smile. Instead, I saw my son's shoulders tighten like he was bracing for a hit. Dad, unfortunately, you won't be welcome here for Christmas. For a second, I thought he was joking, that maybe he meant the guest list was too big or the dining room too small. But his eyes didn't move from the marble coffee table. I remembered picking it out with him last spring at a furniture outlet, after Rachel declared their old one was too basic. Every inch of that house had a story like that. Silk curtains from Macy's when Rachel complained about privacy. Hardwood floors I paid for with a second mortgage. Crown molding that maxed out my credit card because she wanted the place to feel elevated. It was like walking through a museum of my own sacrifices, and here was my son, telling me I didn't belong in it. Why wouldn't I be welcome? My voice cracked against my will. He still wouldn't look at me. Rachel's parents are coming. They prefer to keep traditions their way. It's just easier if you're not here. You know how they are. His words got smaller as he spoke, like he was shrinking into himself. Easier, their way, like I was a spare piece of furniture to be moved out of sight. I scanned the kitchen from where I sat and spotted that brand new KitchenAid mixer gleaming on the counter. $2,000. I remembered Rachel insisting she needed it for her holiday baking phase. She used it maybe twice before it started gathering dust. My money had been baked into every corner of this house, yet I was suddenly too inconvenient to take up a chair at their table. Where will I spend Christmas then? I hadn't meant to say it out loud. The question slipped past my pride before I could stop it. Maybe you could visit Uncle Frank, or we could do something the weekend after. The weekend after? As if Christmas could be penciled in on a calendar for whenever it was convenient. My own son treating me like a dentist appointment. I stood up, my knees popping from years of crawling under cars and hauling toolboxes. My reflection stared back from the glass of their 12-foot tree, dwarfed by ornaments I'd bought from Walmart sales when money was tight. Past the hallway hung family photos, and I noticed something I'd never seen before. In each frame, my face grew smaller, moved further from the center. By the last photo, I was barely visible in the background, half turned away. Maybe that had been the truth for years, and I was just seeing it clearly now. At the coat closet, I brushed past Rachel's wall of jackets. More than 20. Each one tagged from Nordstrom or LL Bean. Most bought in the last 2 years while I wore the same old Carhartt jacket with the frayed cuffs. I wrapped my hand around the doorknob. Cold metal bit into my palm. Son, I said without turning back. His voice trembled. Dad, wait. Tell Rachel's parents. I paused, feeling the weight of the years pressing into my chest. Tell them Feliz Navidad. The December night hit me like a slap when I stepped onto the porch. Behind me, I heard Evan call my name once, then the soft, final click of the door closing. That sound was heavier than any slammed door could have been. It was the sound of a son choosing comfort over blood. I sat in my truck, engine off, staring at the rows of houses lit with Christmas cheer. Each twinkling window seemed to mock me. Families gathering inside without conditions, without caveats. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Probably Evan trying to patch things over with empty words. I didn't answer. Instead, I gripped the wheel and turned the key. The heater hummed against the December cold, and I drove away from the warm glow of a house I had built, but was never meant to belong in. At the red light on Montgomery Road, I saw a young father loading gifts into the back of his SUV. His kids pressed their faces against the frosted windows, their excitement fogging the glass. I remembered when that was me and Evan, back before Rachel, back before my love and labor became invisible line items in someone else's budget. I pressed the gas harder than necessary when the light turned green, the old truck growling beneath me like it shared my anger. By the time I pulled into my cracked driveway, the man I used to be, the man who believed sacrifice would earn respect, felt dead. I unlocked the door to my silent house, the porch light flickering because I hadn't had the cash to replace it. Inside smelled of dust and motor oil from my last side job. No cinnamon candles, no Christmas cookies. Just the echo of Maria's laughter, long gone 8 winters now. I dropped my keys on the counter. The phone started ringing. Rachel's name flashed on the screen, her voice already forming in my head, syrupy sweet and sharp as glass. After all these years, after every bill I paid, every meal I skipped so they could have more, she was going to explain why I wasn't enough for her family's traditions. I let it ring 3 times. 4. Then I picked up. "Dennis," she said, her tone dripping with condescension, "we need to clear up a little misunderstanding." Misunderstanding. That word snapped something inside me. I leaned against the counter, still wearing my jacket, still staring at the peeling paint I hadn't been able to afford to fix. "I don't think there's any misunderstanding, Rachel." The silence stretched so long I could hear my own pulse. And in that silence, I realized this wasn't just about Christmas dinner. This was about everything. And that's when the real story began. When I hung up on Rachel that night, I didn't feel anger so much as a kind of hollow clarity. The kind of silence that settles in your bones when you've run out of excuses for people you love. I sat at my kitchen table, the same wobbly table Maria and I bought from a garage sale back in '92, and I pulled out the drawer where I kept my bills and bank statements. For years I'd avoided opening those envelopes, like if I didn't tally up the numbers, the bleeding wasn't real. But that night, I needed to see it all in black and white. The first sheet I grabbed was from Wells Fargo. $2,600, automatic transfer every month. My son's mortgage. 5 years of those payments stacked neatly like bricks on my back. $156,000 before interest, before late fees, before the extra times Rachel called in a panic because the utilities were due and Evan's paycheck was delayed. I laid them out across the table until the laminate top was buried under paper. It was like staring at the evidence in a trial where I was both victim and defendant. The down payment I'd pulled out of my own home equity, $40,000 gone in a single stroke. The Visa bill with the stainless steel fridge they said was a must-have for hosting. $3,800 I still hadn't finished paying off. Grocery store receipts, Target runs, half the toys in my granddaughter's room stamped with my debit card. I realized I hadn't bought myself a new pair of jeans in 6 years. The cuffs of my Carhartts were shredded. My boots had holes in the soles. But Rachel had a $700 purse hanging in her closet, tag still on. That was the first twist of the knife. The second came when I found a pink slip tucked under one of the bank letters. It was Maria's old notebook, the one she used to balance our household expenses before cancer took her. She'd written a list of dreams on the last page, things she wanted for our retirement. Fix up the porch, road trip to Montana, new recliner for Harold. I traced her handwriting with my thumb and realized every single dollar we'd saved together, every sacrifice, had been poured into Evan's house instead. Maria never got her Montana trip. I never got that recliner. What we built together had been cannibalized to build a life I wasn't welcome in. I sat there until the clock struck midnight, staring at the numbers until they blurred. Then I picked up the phone and called my bank. "Customer service, this is Angela. How can I help you?" My voice was steady. "I need to cancel an automatic transfer, effective immediately." 5 minutes later, it was done. Just like that, 5 years of servitude ended with a few keystrokes. I hung up and sat back, expecting guilt to wash over me. Instead, I felt something else. Relief. For the first time in years, I was keeping my own money. The next morning, the world looked different. I brewed a pot of Colombian roast I'd been saving, not the cheap store brand I'd bought for years to pinch pennies. I added an extra scoop just because I could. Sunlight came through the thin curtains, and for once didn't make the peeling paint on the walls look like failure. It looked like freedom. At 10:45 sharp, my phone rang. Rachel again. "Dennis," she said. She never called me Harold. Only Dennis. Like a business acquaintance she barely tolerated. "My parents land at CVG at 3. They'll be waiting at baggage claim, carousel 5. Can you be there?" I laughed before I could stop myself. "Did you forget about yesterday?" She didn't miss a beat. "Look, whatever that was, we need to focus on practical matters now. You're the only one with time during the day. That's what family does, right? They help each other." Family. The word caught in my throat like a fishbone. "And Dennis," she added, her voice sharpening, "don't embarrass us. Wear something decent. Maybe that blue shirt from Evan's graduation. My parents notice those things." She hung up without a thank you. I poured myself another cup of coffee, sat back, and opened yesterday's crossword. At 3 o'clock sharp, while her parents were circling baggage claim with their designer luggage, I was sitting in my recliner with tomato soup and a grilled cheese sandwich, the kind of comfort meal I hadn't let myself enjoy in years. My phone buzzed, then buzzed again. Calls, texts, voicemails piling up. I turned it face down and let it ring. The Seahawks game was on. I hadn't watched a full game in 5 seasons without being interrupted by some emergency bill. I watched every minute this time. By 6 that evening, the pounding started on my front door. Not knocking, pounding, like someone trying to break it down. I stood slowly, setting down my beer, and opened it to find Rachel and her parents on my porch, their faces red with fury. "What the hell is wrong with you?" her father barked, shoving past me into my living room. He reeked of cologne and self-importance. "We waited for 3 hours at that airport. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was?" Rachel's mother stepped in next, her lips pressed so tight they were nearly white. "This is barbaric behavior, Dennis. Completely unacceptable. At your age, you should know better." Rachel came last, her makeup smudged, her coat wrinkled. "You humiliated us. My parents had to take a cab like common tourists. A $40 cab. Do you have any idea what that does to our reputation?" I stood my ground, letting their rage crash over me like a wave. Then I spoke, calm and low. "This is my house, and you're not welcome here." The room went silent. Rachel's father jabbed a finger an inch from my chest. "You don't know who you're messing with, old man. I have connections in this city. Important people. You'll regret this." "Is that a threat?" I asked. "It's a promise." His voice dropped into a growl. "Actions have consequences. You'll see." I opened the door wide, motioning them out. "Then let's start with this consequence. Get out of my home." They stormed out like a defeated army, but not before her father turned at the threshold. "You'll regret this, Bennett. I guarantee it." The door shut with a click that echoed in my bones. For the first time in years, the air in my house felt clean. But his words lingered. Important people. Consequences. 3 mornings later, I was sipping coffee at my kitchen table when I opened the Cincinnati Enquirer and nearly dropped the mug. Page 3. My photo, an old one from my company website, plastered under the headline, Local Retiree Abandons Elderly Couple at Airport During Winter Storm. I read every word twice. Rachel's parents painted themselves as helpless victims, stranded in the cold while I, unstable, erratic, selfish, left them to fend for themselves. They even invented a snowstorm. It had been 50 degrees and sunny that day. There was no mention of the years of mortgage payments, no mention of Christmas banishment, no mention of the endless sacrifices. Just me, the villain. I folded the paper slowly, my hands shaking. They hadn't just cut me out of Christmas. They were trying to erase me completely, to bury my name in this town under lies. That was the moment something inside me shifted. They thought they were playing checkers. They were about to learn I'd spent my whole life playing chess. I pulled out a fresh notebook and started writing names, dates, numbers. Rachel, Evan, her parents, the reporter who wrote the story. Connections, weaknesses, leverage. Every brick they'd built their false castle on, I was going to pry loose. And this time, I wasn't going to be quiet about it. By Christmas Eve, I had a plan. And it started with showing up at a dinner table I wasn't supposed to be at. By the time the smear article ran in the Inquirer, I knew the game had changed. They weren't satisfied with cutting me out of Christmas. They wanted to paint me as unstable, dangerous, the kind of old man neighbors whisper about while shaking their heads. I spent that whole afternoon sitting at my kitchen table, the newspaper folded neatly in front of me like evidence at a trial. The words burned, but beneath the humiliation I felt something colder, sharper. Determination. I poured myself a bourbon, the good kind I'd been saving, and pulled out a yellow notepad. For the first time in years, I wasn't tallying my losses. I was sketching a plan. The first twist came easy. Rachel's parents thought they'd struck the killing blow by calling in favors at the newspaper. But they'd forgotten something important. Small towns and mid-sized cities like Cincinnati run on gossip, not headlines. Half the people in this city knew me from decades under car hoods, fixing their Fords and Chevys when nobody else would give them a fair price. I'd built goodwill in grease-stained coveralls, while Rachel's family built facades at charity luncheons. My reputation wasn't as fragile as they assumed. Still, I needed proof. I spent the next 2 days pulling receipts, downloading bank statements, and printing out screenshots of Rachel's social media posts, bragging about her beautiful home and hosting skills. Every photo of a vacation, every new appliance, every fancy restaurant, they were all trophies purchased with my sacrifice. And the best part? They documented it themselves. But there was another layer I couldn't ignore. Evan, my son, my flesh and blood, I'd assumed he was just weak, letting Rachel's family push him around. But as I flipped through his LinkedIn profile, I saw something that cut deeper than the newspaper article. Just last week, he'd added Patricia Morrison, the very reporter who'd written the hatchet job on me. A new connection. I didn't need to be a detective to know what that meant. That was the second twist. Evan hadn't just gone along. He'd helped light the fire. I wanted to throw the laptop across the room. Instead, I closed it gently, because fury wasn't going to win this. Precision would. On December 23rd, I ironed my navy suit, the one I'd last worn to Maria's funeral. I thought about her while the iron hissed against the fabric. Maria had a way of reminding me who I was when I forgot. I imagined her voice now, steady and kind, saying, "Stand tall, Harold. Don't let them break you." Christmas Eve came gray and cold, the kind of Ohio winter day when the sky feels close enough to touch. By 6 o'clock, I was parked across from Evan's glowing house in Kendall Yards, the driveway lined with cars I recognized from Rachel's social circle. Through the front windows, I could see laughter, champagne glasses raised, the smug confidence of people who thought they'd already won. I checked my watch. 6:45. Perfect. Dinner would be served, guests seated, no easy escape routes. I grabbed my briefcase, heavier than it had ever felt, and walked up the front steps. The front door, of course, was unlocked. Rachel always bragged that their neighborhood was so safe they didn't even need to lock up. The warmth hit me first, cinnamon and roast beef mingling in the air. The laughter cut off like a record needle scratching when I stepped into the dining room. 12 faces turned toward me. Rachel froze mid-toast, her wine glass trembling. Evan went pale. Rachel's parents looked like they'd seen a ghost. I set my briefcase on the marble sideboard they'd bought with my credit card. "Evening, everyone," I said. My voice was calm, almost cheerful. "Hope you don't mind me joining the family celebration." The silence was delicious. "Dad, you can't just walk in here," Evan stammered. "Actually," I said, popping the clasps on my briefcase, "I can. And I think your guests deserve to know who really paid for this meal, this house, and this lifestyle." I pulled out the first stack of documents and slid them across the table. One by one, guests picked them up, confusion giving way to shock as they flipped through highlighted mortgage payments, receipts, and bank transfers. "What is this?" one woman asked, her fork suspended in midair. 5 years of me paying nearly $3,000 a month to keep this house afloat, I answered. Not to mention the down payment, renovations, and vacations. $250,000, give or take. All while being told I wasn't welcome here for Christmas. Rachel's face twisted into a smile too tight to be real. "He volunteered," she said quickly. "We never asked him." "Actually," I interrupted, pulling out another packet, "let's talk about what you did ask for. Like this KitchenAid mixer, $2,000. The granite countertops, $18,000. Or the luxury Disney trip last year. Paid for by me. Funny how that didn't make it into your little newspaper story." Murmurs rippled around the table. Rachel's father stood, his face blotchy with anger. "This is harassment. You've humiliated us enough." "Humiliation?" I held up the folded newspaper. "You mean this? Where you claimed I abandoned you in a snowstorm that never happened." I spread the article across the table. 50 degrees and sunny, but somehow I'm the villain leaving helpless tourists to freeze. The gray-haired man at the end of the table leaned forward. "Bob, is this true?" All eyes turned to Rachel's father. His jaw worked like a man chewing glass. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Rachel tried again, her voice rising. "He's twisting everything. He's unstable, always has been." But her timing was off. One of her charity friends was scrolling through Rachel's own Facebook page on her phone. "Isabella's not the only one who documents everything," she muttered. Then louder, "Rachel, these photos. You bragged about all of this, and now you're saying it was charity from him?" The room tipped. The current shifted. I could see it in their faces, judgment sliding away from me and landing squarely on them. Evan finally spoke, his voice breaking. "Dad, I didn't know about the article." I locked eyes with him. "Your wife knew. Her parents orchestrated it. You connected with the reporter. Don't insult me by pretending you were innocent." The silence that followed was thicker than any words. Guests stared at Evan and Rachel like they'd been watching a magic trick and suddenly saw the wires. I gathered my papers, snapped the briefcase shut, and straightened my tie. "Enjoy the rest of your dinner. It's the last one you'll have in a house bought with my money." I turned and walked toward the door. Behind me, the eruption began. Raised voices, questions, accusations tearing through the carefully staged holiday atmosphere. I didn't need to look back. I could hear their social mask crumbling. But just as I reached the door, I caught sight of Evan in the reflection of the glass. He wasn't shouting like the others. He was sitting, head in his hands, shoulders shaking. For a flicker of a moment, I felt the old instinct to reach for him, to comfort him, but I kept walking. Outside, the cold night air felt cleaner than any church confessional. I stepped off their porch and into the darkness, my breath clouding in front of me. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a new voicemail. I almost ignored it, but something made me listen. It was Evan. His voice was low, broken. "Dad, it's worse than you think. You don't know everything. Please call me back before it's too late." The message ended. My heart thudded in the quiet street. What didn't I know? I stood there under the Christmas lights, phone cold in my hand, realizing the battle I thought I'd just won might only be the beginning. I didn't sleep much that night. Evan's voicemail kept looping in my head. "You don't know everything." Those 5 words hit harder than Rachel's insults or her parents' threats. What else could there be? What was my own son hiding from me after everything I'd already uncovered? By morning, I had my answers sitting right on my doorstep. A thick white envelope, certified mail, the kind that makes your stomach knot before you even open it. I slit it with my pocket knife and read the first line out loud to myself. Notice of default. 3 months of unpaid mortgage on Evan and Rachel's house. $8,400 in arrears. 14 days to make the payment or face foreclosure. I stood there on my porch in the cold, the December air biting my cheeks, and laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the irony was so sharp it almost cut. They'd spent years treating me like their personal ATM, and the second I closed the vault, the whole fantasy life collapsed. I set the letter on my kitchen table beside Maria's old coffee mug and poured myself a fresh cup. For the first time in a long time, I felt no guilt. I'd done my part, and then some. The consequences were theirs now, but deep down, I knew this wasn't just about money. That voicemail from Evan meant something bigger. 2 days later, I found out what. I was at the grocery store, sliding a pack of ground beef into my cart, when I ran into a neighbor who worked at the courthouse. She lowered her voice and said, "Harold, you might want to know. Rachel's father filed a complaint. He's trying to have you investigated for elder neglect. Claims you abandoned him and his wife at the airport in dangerous weather." I stared at her, my hands tightening around the cart handle until my knuckles went white. "Dangerous weather? It was 50 degrees and sunny." She shrugged. "Doesn't matter. He's got friends in the city. He's spinning it as a pattern of erratic behavior. You need to watch your back." That was the first twist. They weren't just smearing me in the paper. They were trying to drag me into legal trouble. I drove home with the groceries rattling in the back seat and the weight of betrayal pressing on my chest. On the way, I passed Evans Street. Against my better judgment, I slowed down. His house was dark, the curtains drawn, but in the driveway, a for sale sign leaned crookedly in the frozen ground. My son hadn't mentioned selling. Either he didn't know, or Rachel had gone behind his back. That was the second twist. The house I'd broken myself to build for them was already being prepped for the market. Like I'd never been part of the story at all. That night, Evan finally showed up at my door. He looked 10 years older than the last time I'd seen him, with dark circles under his eyes and a suit that looked slept in. He didn't knock gently. He pounded like a man with nothing left to lose. When I opened the door, he didn't waste time. "Dad, I screwed up. Bad. I didn't know about the article. That was Rachel and her parents. But the mortgage? The late payments? That's on me." His voice cracked. "I thought I could keep up once you stopped helping. I couldn't." I let him in. We sat across from each other at my kitchen table, the foreclosure notice between us. He rubbed his face with both hands. "Rachel's father promised he'd cover us if you cut us off. Said he'd pull some strings at the bank, but he lied. Now we're drowning. And Rachel," his voice dropped, "she's already looking at houses in her parents' neighborhood. Smaller places. I think she's planning to leave me once the house is gone." That was the third twist. Rachel hadn't just turned Evan against me. She was about to discard him too, like an empty wrapper once the candy was gone. I should have felt satisfaction. A part of me did. But looking at my son, broken and desperate, another part of me ached. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about dignity, about how far a man could be pushed before he decided enough was enough. I leaned forward, my voice low. "Evan, you need to understand something. Your wife and her parents didn't just bleed me dry. They set me up to look like a fool. They tried to destroy my name in this city. And now they're doing the same thing to you. You think they'll stand by you once the house is gone? You're just collateral to them." His eyes filled with tears, and for a moment I saw the little boy who used to sit on my shoulders to hang ornaments on our Christmas tree. What do I do, Dad? I sat back. The question hung between us like smoke. For years I would have reached for my checkbook. This time I reached for something else. The thick folder of evidence I'd built. Receipts, bank statements, social media posts, the newspaper article with lies highlighted in red. I don't know what you're going to do, I said slowly, but I know what I'm going to do. They wanted to make this public? Fine. Let's make it public. The truth. This time. Evan looked at the folder like it was dynamite. Dad, if you go through with this, you'll blow everything up. Rachel, her parents, their reputation, mine too. I stood, walked to the window, and pulled back the curtain. Outside, the neighborhood glowed with Christmas lights. Families sitting down to dinners I'd never be invited to. Sometimes things need to be blown up, I said. When I turned back, Evan was staring at me like he didn't recognize me. Maybe he didn't. Maybe I didn't either. The man I used to be, the one who begged for scraps of respect, was gone. In his place was someone harder, someone who'd been forced to learn that silence only breeds more humiliation. I picked up the folder, slapped it down on the table, and met his eyes. On Christmas night, in front of their friends and neighbors, I'm going to tell the truth. All of it. Every dollar, every lie, every insult. And you'll have to decide which side of the table you want to be on when I do. The clock on the wall ticked loud in the silence. Evan's lips parted, but no words came. Then from outside, headlights swept across the front of the house. A car pulled into my driveway. Black sedan. Too polished for this neighborhood. My stomach tightened as a figure stepped out. Not Evan's in-laws, not Rachel. Someone else. A man in a long coat, carrying a briefcase. He walked up the steps and knocked once. Firm, deliberate. "Who the hell is that?" Evan whispered. I didn't answer. I opened the door. The man handed me a business card without a word. On it, in bold print, Office of the Prosecutor, Investigation Division. I looked at the card, then at Evan, who'd gone pale as a ghost. Whatever battle I thought I was fighting, it had just escalated into something bigger than I'd ever imagined. The business card in my hand felt heavier than it should have. Office of the Prosecutor, Investigation Division. I looked at Evan, pale and silent, at my kitchen table, and I realized his voicemail hadn't been a plea for help. It had been a warning. The investigator stepped inside, his coat dripping with melted snow. Briefcase clicking open on my table. He laid out papers like a surgeon laying out instruments, subpoenas, complaints, testimony drafts. My name was on the first page. Mr. Bennett, we've had multiple reports concerning neglect and financial misconduct. I'll need you to answer a few questions. My laugh came out sharp. Neglect? Financial misconduct? That's rich. He didn't smile. Your son's in-laws allege you abandoned them at the airport during dangerous weather conditions, that you have a pattern of erratic behavior, and that you used financial leverage to intimidate your family. I stared at the stack of papers. It was all there, the very narrative Rachel's father had been building. They were trying to turn my own defense into evidence against me. I glanced at Evan, who looked like a man drowning. His eyes told me he hadn't filed a thing, but he also hadn't stopped them. That was the twist I should have seen coming. They weren't just trying to humiliate me in the neighborhood. They were trying to bury me under the law. But what they didn't know was that I'd been keeping my own paper trail. I slid my folder across the table to the investigator. He hesitated, then flipped it open. Bank transfers, mortgage records, receipts for renovations, appliances, vacations, highlighted notes showing every dollar bled from me into their house, social media posts printed with timestamps, Rachel bragging about our dream kitchen, the very kitchen I'd paid for, and at the back, the crown jewel, screenshots of the weather report from the so-called winter storm, 52 degrees and sunny. The investigator's brow furrowed. He kept reading, flipping faster as the picture sharpened. So you're telling me you were the one supporting them financially? For years I nodded. Every cent. And when I finally stopped, they went after my name. Evan spoke up for the first time, his voice raw. It's true. Dad covered everything. My wife, her parents, they used him. And when he said no, they came after him. I was too much of a coward to stop it. The room was quiet but charged, and the kind of quiet that comes right before a storm. The investigator shut his briefcase. Mr. Bennett, thank you for your cooperation. I'll be following up with their side. In the meantime, I'd recommend you prepare to make a formal statement. When he left, Evan dropped his face into his hands. Dad, I think I just destroyed my marriage. I put a hand on his shoulder. No, son. She destroyed it the moment she decided her parents' pride mattered more than her husband or her child's grandfather. Christmas night came, and with it, the last act. Their dinner party was supposed to be a showpiece, a gathering of their circle to polish their reputation. Instead, half the guests arrived, buzzing with whispers about subpoenas and investigations. I knew because I was standing outside when the first murmurs drifted through the frosted windows. When I walked in, briefcase in hand, I wasn't met with surprise this time. I was met with stares. Rachel's face drained of color, her father's smirk gone, her mother frozen with a wine glass halfway to her lips. I set the newspaper article on the table, then the foreclosure notice, then the stack of receipts and photos, each document louder than any words I could have spoken. The guests leaned forward, reading, whispering, eyes widening as the story unfolded in real time. Rachel tried to speak. He's twisting this. He's unstable. But one of her own friends cut her off. Then why does every one of your posts line up with these receipts? You said your parents gave you that kitchen. You said your husband's career paid for this house. The room tipped again, but this time there was no coming back. Her father slammed a hand on the table. You'll regret this, Bennett. I leaned close enough for him to see the years he'd stolen etched into my face. Number you'll regret underestimating the wrong man. By the end of the night, Rachel and her parents weren't hosts anymore. They were pariahs, cornered by their own lies, their own greed. The guests left not with warm goodbyes, but with cold stares and muttered judgments. And within weeks, the prosecutor's office had opened a full inquiry into fraudulent claims, with Rachel's father's name at the center. The house went into foreclosure. Their friends evaporated. Rachel's marriage to Evan cracked under the weight of truth, and this time she couldn't spin it away with wine and charm. As for me, I didn't get back the years or the money, but I got something better, my name, my dignity, and the peace that comes from knowing the truth won't stay buried forever. The last twist wasn't theirs, it was mine. The man they tried to erase from his own family story was the one who ended it with the final word. What did I learn? That love without respect is just debt in disguise. That silence isn't kindness, it's permission. And that sometimes the only way to keep your soul intact is to finally stop paying for everyone else's comfort. If any of this sounds like a piece of your own story, share it with me in the comments. Maybe you've carried a weight you never said out loud. Maybe you've been the one cut out or the one who finally said no. And if you want to hear more stories like mine, subscribe and stay with me. Sometimes the only way we heal is by telling the truth, even when it hurts.